Everybody, I think we've just had a really good 3 or 4 hours of deep learning from a really great panel of experts here. I think, given that we've just ended with responsible AI, we opened with open models, it's a way for us to maybe bookend the conversation to start off with. So, as we seem to be standing at an intersection between open models, responsible AI, and rapid advancement in technology, what do you see, maybe this is to Oscar and Alex here, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for businesses and individuals to leverage over the next 12 months? And by the way, for the rest of the panel, if you want to chip in, feel free to do so, just pass the microphone.
I think there's all different sizes of businesses, right? So they're all going to move at different speeds. But I think it's probably easier to start talking about small business because we know from experience that they're more agile. It's easier to move on new technologies and easier to pick up something and get incorporated into workflows that they might not yet be even defined. And so I think for, and I've heard quotes about this, which I'll probably quote anyway, that there's a real opportunity for small business to catch up to larger businesses through AI, and it has been called the great equalizer. And I think that for businesses of 50 to 100 people, there's lots of things that they're trying to do, they're trying to grow, and the moment they start thinking about growth, I think that there's a lot of ways that AI can help them do that. And they just need to be a bit strategic about how they approach it.
I'll take it from a very different angle. I think to me what's very exciting as an opportunity, more so not for the business themselves, is for the ecosystem as a whole. And right now, in terms of responsible AI, anybody that tells you that they are an expert and they have so many years of experience, that most likely grossly exaggerated. The reality is that we're all learning as we go. This is brand spanking new stuff. So to me, the biggest opportunity is that we get to set the tone, and it is going to be the industry as a whole that is going to set the bar for what we consider to be responsible. To me, this is equivalent as being into compilers in the 60s or into web technologies in the early 2000s, right? So responsible AI, it's literally brand new, and we get to define what it is, and to me that's super exciting as an industry.
So I've heard that before about small businesses seeing this as a great opportunity to be that equalizer, and I think, Oscar, you mentioned in your opening talk that it would be a shame if AI, and particularly advancements of AI, was locked into businesses that had large capital, big budgets behind them. So I guess when it comes to that, from a small business point of view, and Alex, you kind of touched on this, but this is really open to the entire panel. How is a business best positioned to tap into AI in one way, shape, or form? Like, for instance, are we far away from having agent-to-agent conversations, business-to-business processes, or inter-business processes? At what point are we able to sort of really differentiate on that, or is that still too far into the future? Keen to get panel's thoughts.
I'm the agent now. Look, I think in terms of current capability, agent-to-agent communication or cooperation in a sort of unsupervised, unstructured way that yields a particular outcome is still not here yet. And as much as I think we've seen examples of things like AutoGPT, where you can have agentic solutions out there doing that. They're not yet at that commercial level, which would make sense for a small business to be just putting some money in something. Now there are platforms that are working on that. I think that this will change in the next 6 to 12 months. I definitely see agentic workflows, agentic sort of workforces. I know because I'm building one that where you will have agents talking to agents. your business will be comprised of a marketing agent who's actually an AI and a personal assistant for you individually, and a whole bunch of other different types of agents. We're still some way away from that being a competitive advantage for businesses yet. But also one of the other challenges of the tools today, I think, is that if you, so these are publicly available tools, the question isn't, is it going to create a competitive advantage for you individually? Like you can have a first mover advantage by using tools, but you can certainly be significantly disadvantaged by being a laggard in that space. But I guess that's okay.
So all the YouTube videos I've seen of phones talking to phones trying to book flights is all fake. Is that deep fake?
Like they work in that very specific scenario in that and they probably took 20 times to get it right. So it's not reliable in that sense.
As well. So from a customer perspective, right? So when I'm thinking about the people that I deal with day to day, they're not even ready to start thinking about how that would come to be, right? The level of process they have internally doesn't dictate a process that you can yet build around that to automate it, right? They're still coming in from a, how are we going to generate this monthly report in a way that everyone can understand, right? Not a, how we're going to build an AI agent that can handle this entire business department. So I think we're too junior in this space as a whole right now to start considering that agent to anything.
So one of the key things that almost everyone has spoken about is the need for data to sort of drive these systems. And coming from a data background, I think that makes perfectly logical sense to me. And I think, Evan, it was during your talk, and you kind of mentioned, look, one of the reasons why they fail is because we don't have data in the right format or available to test the hypothesis that you were talking about. So is it good enough if we don't have the right data to still not experiment? Like, how do we advance the field? How do we advance our learning if we're not prepared to now go?
Yeah, from that perspective, I'd say which kind of we, who's we. So if we look at the organisation, absolutely get your hand off the gear stick and just leave it alone. You shouldn't even be driving that car if you don't have data in place. Because what I'm going to bet massively is your process and your organisation is working. It's not even a data problem. You've got an organisational problem. And throwing AI at that is just a waste of money. Just forget it. If you're trying to, we as the researchers, when we lack the data and people that are trying to build the models, they themselves, I think, can still tackle these problems without the data from a specific organisation or a specific place, or if there's problems with the processes creating data, there's nothing stopping them generating their models and going elsewhere and creating synthetic data or filling those gaps with other things. But I think from an organisational perspective, if you truly don't have the data, just forget AI. We've got other problems you need to solve. Don't even go there.
Anyone else want to add to that? That's not good news for a consulting firm like NCS.
I think it's fantastic news for you guys, because what I know about NCS is you guys aren't just hey, build me a widget and don't think for me on the side. I think NCS, and I've known you guys now for 4 or 5 years as an organisation, help do that thinking. It's like you're hand in hand with the organisation to think with them, not just order taking. You can provide that data, which I think is really important. And so it's not just a matter of, hey, your process is broken, hands up, I'm walking away. I think many organisations like NCS, where you add data, this is one of the challenges we have here. I think we're very point solution focused. We could only build it if your data was good. And if your data wasn't good, one of the things the previous company was that we didn't have the consultants to walk in and help you with those processes and changes. So we often would have to walk away, unfortunately.
To piggyback on another thing that was brought to the prevalent the other day is that, just in the same way that AI is a tool, it's not the tool, right? And trying to think of what can we do with AI is thinking of a solution and think from the problem first. If you think about about data and collecting data, well, if thinking about AI first is putting the cart before the horse, thinking about data to the AI is putting a second cart in front of the first cart in front of the horse. And you really need to think about it from a problem first perspective. What are you trying to solve? And to give you a very specific example here, I do a lot of mentoring for startups when it comes to AI. I mentioned the Google work. We also do some for-profit work. In many cases, people come with this great idea saying, oh, you're going to be able to help us with AI, or you're going to have the world's best AI system. And it turns out that AI is a minuscule part of what they're trying to solve. And in many other cases, or the majority of cases, the bulk of the work is completely elsewhere. One of the recent examples, it was primarily a UX problem, using a data problem. You have to solve the issue first through UX and then through a tiny little bit of AI, and we got massive increase in X, Y, and Z.
So I think that's a really good point, because our experience, my personal experience consulting often shows that there's many ways to skin the proverbial cat, and there's lots of ways to solve problems. So how do you, given, I think that Evan, you mentioned about the need for alignment in your, sorry, if you can't hear me moving the microphone, the need for the alignment in organisations from, boards down to senior managers and people like ourselves to have successful projects. How do we help? What would be a good lesson for us to take away to say, how can we best help organisations find the right tool for the right job, and not everything is an AI problem?
It's a really interesting question, because it comes back to the point I made on the people slide when I showed it, where I kind of said really almost every problem could have just grouped under people. We could just throw everything at people. This kind of comes back to the point where how will this organisation itself know anything if it doesn't have the right people with those skills to kind of solve those problems? I think it comes back to the point where I was saying, where if management is making the call on what machine learning or data science tool you should choose, you're in trouble. You're in deep trouble. And it should be left to the experts to kind of do these things. Someone asked me a really good question when I was on the book tour with Doug, and they're kind of like, we're at stage 0, how do we get to 1? Like, we've got nothing, like, how do we get to AI anything? That's a really deep question, and a difficult one to answer. And I said, look, you don't get there by just suddenly teleporting yourself to 1, and all of a sudden you're an AI company. I saw it by many small steps. I said, look, here's where I'd start if I was you. I want to get to AI, and you've got zero confidence within the organisation, you don't know where to go. I said, start somewhere where there is some data that you can probably trust. My God, I hope it's in your financial statements, because if you can't trust that, you're in deep trouble. So I say, go look at your financials, and that's somewhere where you can start with some data you should be able to trust. And begin with that and start looking at that data and understanding it. Build some BI dashboards to get some visibility on what's going on there, that you can help make good decisions. Once you've got that, you pass that little threshold of data maturity, then start building some forecasts perhaps in there. Try and say, hey, look, how many sales do I think I'll have next month, the month after that? And start working around that 0 to 1 by lots of little steps to get there. And I think by doing that, you can then build up some capability, because the other question you'll ask me straight away, well, that doesn't help getting capability, I've got none. So now I need to hire the right people. How do I find the right people? Because they can't even judge who's right or not. I got to hire one of these LinkedIn overnight AI experts who's got no idea what to do, fleeces me for 6 months, and I get nothing from them. Right? It's a joke. And so I think there's an onus on the organisation to build up some of their own internal capability through some curiosity and desire to learn it. They build that, they get a few of those simple skills. It's honestly not like companies are really on stage 0. Most companies are about 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. And they can start building from there and start hiring people at the next stage. So what I'm recommending is, if you're standing here, don't try and jump from 0 to 1. Jump from 0 to 0.1. Jump from 0.1 to 0.3, jump from 0.3 to 0.5. Like, don't try and do this huge leap to now building foundational models when you couldn't even get your financials right.
I'll just add to that. And I totally agree with that. I think taking a stock take a little bit of like what you really have is really important for a business to do. Because it kind of also, you might have your own, the other alternative to that is they think that they know where they want to go, but they actually don't have the tool, they don't have what they need to get there. And that's probably the more common thing that I've seen is like, hey, I really want to have this, this AI that can do forecasts, but I don't have data. So, problem one, come get some data. But there's a whole lot of data that businesses already do have. It's just not, it's not spreadsheets, right? So as a practical example, which worked with a business last year sometime where they're basically putting out social media content about their products and services. So, well, they've got product sheets. They know exactly what products they're selling. They know what those products do. They've got specifications for them. Wouldn't it be great if you could just, bring that into a RAG model and put it on the website so that your customer can actually ask you questions about your products and not have to go through the 1960s website. Those are the kind of things where just a small stock take of what they do have can lead to an improvement on what they do, could lead to an improvement on how they do it.
And that's exactly what sort of we do as well, right? Is we go, where's the quick win, right? Like, you've got agents answering calls. How do we put something in their hands to make the calls better or faster or more efficient? And it's internal. So if there's bias, if there's hallucinations, if there's something that goes crazy, your employees are now trained for the process, right? To mitigate that risk internally. And that will then give you learnings that you can then take to maybe go a little deeper, a little further. But it's exactly what we're seeing in the market is, like you said, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. Their processes, their houses matter, but they want to throw AI at it. And the excuse is their time poor. Okay, well, if your time poor, where's your time being sank? Do you even know? Right? How do we buy you time back so you can reinvest those resources potentially in helping us build a better model or generate the data we need to even start? Right?
Sorry, I realise we might be throwing around acronyms that not everyone knows. So when we say like RAG models, do people know what we mean by that? Yeah, mostly. Some people are too afraid to nod their heads or shake their heads. Yeah. Does anyone of the panel just want to explain how things like that affect models and why they're seen as useful patterns these days?
Yeah, so it's retrieval augmented generation. So basically it allows you to connect an external source of some description and build a larger context within the model to consume as part of its existing response.
Yeah,
In its simplest.
And sorry, and that's come about because Gen AI has been fantastically accurate this whole time.
Yeah, you're 100% spot on there. Basically trying to solve the bias problem, the hallucination problem, right? So people think throw more data, solve the problem.
In the case of organisations, then, so we're talking about the need to sort of build some tools, maybe tap into open models, etc., just to help accelerate AI adoption or even experiment with AI in organisations. If I'm a developer, software engineer of some sort, how do I decide which models to use? How do I, if you were talking about assessment methodologies and things like that, how do I decide between one large language model versus another? At what point do I decide to build my own custom model or a small language model? Where are the pros and cons? Where do I draw the line? How do I figure this out?
Yeah, it depends on how far through the career you are, right? How much time you've got under your belt.
We've got about 10 minutes in.
Yeah. So in terms of the way that I approach that sort of problem is I use standardized data that I expect a certain output from, and I feed that across the set to figure out what's going to be most beneficial for me. But that doesn't work for everyone. In terms of should you be training your own models, I would say if you want to learn, go for it. But largely outside of that, I don't really see a reason to, unless you have a specific problem to solve that is the nation or a specialized tool would sort of solve. A lot of the generative models that are out there, a lot of the ML frameworks that are out there do a really good job generally. So I'm actually looking for something specific. I don't necessarily know how to train something specific. You want to add to it?
Yeah, I can add a really quick comment through the point you made. We look at the history books and we look at Bloomberg GPT and remember that. Probably not, because it died. So Bloomberg invested millions of dollars in a team of 100 people building his own GPT based on their Bloomberg terminal data, which is used for share trading in the USA. They ran it out there. I think after 6 months it was no longer used because ChatGPT could outperform it. So this is a fine-tuning model that they've created from scratch. Anyone heard of Falcon 40 billion parameter model from TIR and had another? Yeah? I haven't heard anything from them recently. So they've also fallen over. So people are trying to build their models all over the place. And what we're seeing is this kind of, unless you're the big guys on the block, and unless you've got a lot of money to play in the space, long-term you're not going to survive. So a very normal business, I just don't know if we plans to know, do you want to ever build a foundational model? In fact, discussions around whether Australia should build a foundational model I find is questionable. Like I know Anton down at the AIML is screaming loudly, we should build our own foundational model. I don't know if I agree with him or not. I haven't thought deeply about it, but I know. And coming back to answering your other question around, Cameron, around what tools to use in a certain situation, again, if you're not an expert, it's tricky, right? Like if you know what you're doing, you'll kind of figure that one out. And I think the way you become that expert is through experience. So I think to your point, Ben, exactly, just keep playing around with things and trying. Maybe in a corporate setting, you don't have that time to do it. You know, if this is your career, spend a bit of time on the weekend figuring it out.
If I can just add to that, so not my story, but does everyone know Leonardo AI? They're an Australian startup, just got bought out by Canva. Really great bunch. They're the people in Brisbane, I can't remember how much they sold for, but it was a lot of money and made a few people very rich. I've been to an event where they explained their journey, and they started with just an open source model. They built their platform on top of an open source model. As they went about doing that, they kind of said, well, the reason we're going to do this is it's just too hard for people to go to GitHub and download this thing and then do all the building. You've got to be a developer to figure out how to use the model so they can build their own interface that let people jump online, create a generative AI image of any kind, any style, right? So that's kind of go with their platform. It's free as well. Anyway, it was quite strategic for them not to build their own model because they knew that they would need millions. I'm not joking, millions of dollars to train the damn thing. Like you need hardware, you need time, and by the way, it's a gamble. I think that's the other thing that people don't understand is fine-tuning and training your own model is a gamble. You don't know if what you're creating is going to be better than the other things that are already in the market. So if you're a startup or you want to create a startup, just don't. They actually ended up building their own model. I think they call it the Phoenix model. And the reason they did that was because there was a problem with the image generation models that they just did text very badly. They couldn't generate text. So it said like, design me an exit sign, it would get this, the E might be a bit wonky or non-existent or something. So they realized that there was a need in the market for a better model and that all of the current models didn't have that there. I think they raised $50 million or something like that, and some of that went to their R&D department to go and build this thing, but it was a gamble. So I would say, unless you like gambling, don't, and if it's your own money, definitely don't. Do that, yeah.
Sorry, no, we've already talked about this question, but I want to add one more thing. It's not just about how to choose a model, but you also need to choose how to use that particular model, and it's a spectrum. On the lowest hanging fruits, you can use the model as is, and it's just some flavor from the engineer, some really basic ways of how you can poke and probe the model. The next level is doing some more inference time, mechanisms such as RAG. We discussed RAG earlier. There are plenty of other significantly very active area of research, but you're still using the model as is. A little further down the pipeline, you have fine tuning, and it is not as bad as it sounds because now we have what's called very efficient fine tuning, and actually it's not as expensive as it used to be, even though these models have literally billions of parameters, so something not quite bad. And then all the way at the end is when you have training your own foundation models from scratch. And I also want to discourage anyone from even thinking about it, because you can spend however millions of dollars you can, and you can have, say that you succeed and you have the world's best model at the end of the day. How much longer you think you're going to continue to be the world's best model? Because all these other big players in big tech, they're releasing new models every 2, 4, 6 months, right? So maybe you are better off thinking about how you can leverage that very fast-moving train as opposed to trying to build your own train and your own tracks of your own.
So
So I think the summary here is,
Llama 3 had something the guy Matthew said they had 60,000 computers to train the GPUs to train Llama 3. So if you think you're going to go and do that from scratch, you also did start thinking about mean time to failure and how you're going to do that as well.
yeah, nice big clusters. And I think the summary from that then is, leverage what's there, build on what's there, don't try and reinvent the wheel. Yeah.
Go play.
Sorry?
Go play.
Go play.
Yeah.
Let's just change tack a little bit. We've talked about projects, and I do want to touch on the whole maybe 80% of projects fail thing. But maybe before we get there, because we've got Google and consulting firms and product companies here, I'd like each of you to just describe what does a good AI project look like in your own firm from what you've seen. It'll be interesting thoughts here.
A clear use case, clear way to measure success, clean data, and top-down support, basically. If I can get those 4 things, watch it happen.
Look, from my side, I think practically one thing is a long-term commitment. I think if a company can long-term commit to this, even if they have none of those characteristics you've described, if they've got patience and budget, they'll get there. If they're not a bunch of idiots, like if they keep learning from their mistakes and keep fixing stuff, they'll get there. So, a great AI project from my side, just thinking of one, I worked with an organization where we deployed one of Australia's first ever retail pricing engines that ran in real time across 550 stores, 6 products to update minutely. And I think where that came from and why that one worked was excellent leadership on the side of the client. So just a guy who has just said, I know this is not going to work out of the box. I know we're going to have a few iterations of this. I've got this built into the timelines. He then put an excellent project manager. I'll never ever forget if I don't want to become a project manager. This guy was just incredible on the project from start to finish. He managed the bad news, which is excellent. Just continue managing bad news. We have to hide it, but things aren't working. Here it is, it's not working. Let's work on this together. And he was very collaborative in that fashion. So you didn't have to hide bad news from you could just roll out. So things didn't work perfectly all the way through, but because we stuck to it long term and committed, we delivered. That's something that no other company in Australia had ever done before.
All of that, that's really great. Probably the one thing I would add is that there can be a really clear use case, and they can be great leadership, but they can also be, I think, early on and perhaps continuously as you're throughout this project, you need to consider the feasibility and continually adapting your thinking about how feasible it is that we're actually going to get to that outcome and reevaluating that as you go. And sometimes there are crazy ideas that don't seem feasible, but you go and do a little POC and then you surprise yourself. Great place to be.
I think that there are a lot of different components that can play into the success or failure of different projects. In addition to having the appropriate organizational structure that supports an AI project, I think that it is about being nimble and understanding that you need to go from the solution first. From the problem first, rather than starting with the solution. And so once you've understood the problem and it is a good problem for AI, you build that proof of concept, the initial idea that proof that this actually works, and that is the first 90%. And then actually solving the problem and productionizing this, and you deal with things like data issues and people problems and user problems. That's the second 90%. That's where the actual bulk of the work goes, in my opinion. So yes, you can prove that AI works and it solves the problem, but then bringing that into production and actually making it successful, that's a whole other set of work, and that is completely unrelated to AI for the most part.
I think you just raised a really interesting point. So, and we kind of see this a lot of desire to experiment, test feasibility, do POC, but the transition into a production environment is challenging. And I think, Alex, on your presentation, you kind of said Australia is leading, which was in terms of our, maybe the word I should use is reluctance or slow adoption to AI. So maybe let's just touch on that. So what are those challenges to getting something into production? Why does that then seem to be a challenge? And is that related at all to that sort of general survey consensus that you had, which said we were a bit of slow adopters to this, or maybe reluctant adopters? I'm also trying to read into that stat.
Yeah, I think so. That relates to individual adoption of AI, and I think Australians generally are a bit cautious about having interactions with AI today. And so not quite in relation to kind of that production stuff, but I guess one of the challenges with as you can point out, like if you've got you might have a very MVP, you've got this idea and you've got to build something. A couple of things you should be thinking about when you even get before you even go into production. How could I handle 100,000 users? How could I handle 40 million users? Is what I'm building able to scale? And if I need to scale, how can I scale that without bringing on board 2,000 engineers to manage it? How can I do that and keep my team small? Those are all things that become more around I'm building a business here, and it's not just about the technology anymore. And then once you're in production, how do you make changes without really messing up all your customers' data, and without your system going down and all those things? And so you start thinking about DevOps and you think about how you have continual deployment and integration, and all of that's really hard. And then that great. I think every coder I've ever met, will go into a code base at some point. Okay, this is really shit code. Who wrote this? And then, it was me 6 months ago. And you're like, well, I can't change it because someone's using it right now. So that's going to stay there forever. And it's amazing how many things that are temporary become permanent. A little temporary fix you did. So I would say it just is really hard. And everything takes long. The moment you're in production, everything takes longer than it used to. And those are things that just add to the challenge and the fun.
So when I help customers on board AI, they generally say they are getting a problem that they need to maintain, generally. And they just need to weigh up the investment in maintaining that versus the return on investment of continuing to keep it. Because ultimately, every 6 months, every 3 months, every day, you're going to need to make sure this thing is doing exactly what you hope it is. And if it's not, have solutions or systems ready to mitigate that risk.
And I think in some cases, this is a design pattern we've kind of seen before from IT systems and application support maintenance over time. So is there any significant difference between an AI-based solution and any other sort of IT form solution that you would need to then consider part of its ongoing maintenance and upkeep?
The generative AI, you need humans in the loop. You need people evaluating and validating the outputs, at least a percentage of them. I don't see any other way around it. AI, reading from AI, you just kind of end up in the same situation again eventually. So traditional IT, we can monitor the metrics, we can monitor the time series stuff, we can set alarms and alerts on specific thresholds. It's different in the generative AI space. We don't have that clear line in the sand that says this is broken and deal with it. We have to have a acceptable risk framework, and then how and when we action whatever it may be based on the results we're seeing day to day, month to month, week to week.
So you just said risk frameworks there. Do organizations consider AI as part of their corporate risk strategy? This is kind of slightly high level in technology.
They better. And if they don't, we help them. Because you are reporting risk. Just like when you employ someone, right? You're basically bringing something into the fold that has access to some critical information eventually, and you need to have a way to mitigate what happens when that goes wrong. There are frameworks that are out there that we can link on. I generally lean on Google, so that's where I play. But there's many open source versions of it out there.
I was going to say, I think that almost plays a little bit into that responsible AI component as well. So I think in Australia, certainly at a company directors level, there's a lot of discussion at the board level as to the appropriate use and application of AI. Something that we didn't touch on though, as we were talking earlier, was the sustainable aspect of it. Maybe we did, but I've read a lot of stats over the last sort of 6 months about the cost of running AI or ChatGPT questions and the like. So at what point do we need to be concerned that we're consuming, the cost to support AI outweighs the broader benefit to us as a whole?
I mean, from my perspective, when I'm helping customers, it depends on their willingness to spend versus what the return on that investment will be. If you're thinking about it more holistically from an energy perspective, goodness knows, right? At the moment, they're talking about setting up nuclear reactors just to train more models, right? So, is that the right direction? I'm not one to say, but it's a hard question to ask. And like in my vacuum, in which I operate, I leave that up to the client generally to make those decisions. But it does come down to a pros and cons list, right? Like, what are we willing to accept versus what are we willing to let go?
Maybe just a quick comment on that one. Most organisations of a decent size will have a whole bunch of policies that run with. A lot of them will have CSR and ESG ones and codes of conduct. I assume that they make a decision around using an AI system or not. If it says in their code of conduct or in their corporate governance documents that they need to weigh out the impact on the environment, then they just got to do that. If it doesn't exist in their policy documents, they won't care. So I've always moved on what gives them a competitive advantage, just being pragmatic. If you then take a step back and ask the question from society what we should do, you know what, part of me loves it. Part of me loves the fact that we're building small nuclear reactors to power these data centers, because of the fact that I think that's going to drive innovation and have spillover effects in other spots. And that's often what happens with these things. So that we're going to build these modular nuclear reactors. Nuclear reactors are normally a terrible technology because of the fact that they're once off. There's a fantastic book on how big things get done that talks about the most disastrous projects in society that we develop as human beings, the cost overruns and time overruns. And the two biggest ones, I think, one's to do with nuclear, and they go like 300% overrun, and Olympic Games, which go massively over. They're a terrible, terrible idea to run. So we would think where the silly cities would run Olympic Games, they need to think twice. So nuclear reactors, and it comes to the principle that one of the major issues that cause massive projects overruns is the lack of modularity. It's a lack of repeatability. And two of the major infrastructure style projects that never seem to run over are wind and solar farms. And that's why their costs are going down, because it's just clip and play. You keep clipping these solar cells, and they become extremely cost effective. So just from my own sort of looking at these patterns in society, you've got to go, that's terrible, you consume all this energy. Part of me thinks, wait a second, if we force us to develop these modular nuclear reactors and we find this energy source, that especially for fourth generation nuclear reactors that work off the waste of third generation nuclear reactors, and actually turn into something that's not anywhere near as bad. I know South Australia is going to deal with Taiwan a while ago to take their nuclear waste, run fourth generation nuclear facility, and then give it back to them. They pay for them to take their waste, they get energy for free. There are real opportunities here. I'm kind of all for us pushing in this direction and forcing us to find solutions, because they're going to be spillover effects.
I've had the unique benefit of having designed and built data centers in my life, amongst many other things I've done. And when you're building a data center and what you're thinking about is PUE and what the effectiveness of your compute is. And I know that when we, if you look in the market right now, you see NVIDIA is just smashing it, right? But if you look at what that company is actually doing over a 10-year period, they are progressively investing in the gradual reduction in the cost of compute. That's what they've been doing. So just think about this, like whoever's got a laptop or a PC or whatever at home, the chips that go into them are millions of times faster than what we've had in the earliest generations, right? They consume a fraction of the power that they used to. And if you look at NVIDIA specifically, they keep tracking to Moore's law even when Intel and the others don't. And so what we're seeing is this exponential growth in compute. And at the same time, we're seeing that the required energy to drive that compute has either stayed flat or gone down and kind of fluctuated like that to the point where, I personally have the same transformer in my PC that I've had for the last 20 years, and it's still operating perfectly fine. And the new generation of technology is just going to go that way. And when you look at where Apple's going, where they're embedding, chips in your phone that'll run these models, so where the cost of inference is coming down to zero, the cost of compute is coming down to zero, and I see that in the short term we're going to invest a lot in energy, but in the long term, not only are we going to get better at how we deliver energy and how we source that energy, but we're also going to get better at how we use it, because that's what drives those industries.
I think the innovation angle is very interesting. I haven't thought of it that way. I like to see things from the lens of game theory, and when it comes to organizations, in many cases, it's simply down to incentives. And I think right now we have absolutely not necessarily right now, but in tech in general, the incentive is to hop onto the hype flywheel, right? And you have two startups that are looking for funding, and they're in the same field, and they all both have the same message for everything, and one is using AI and the other one is not. Who do you think is going to get funding? Probably the AI, right? So that's going to lead to a lot of senseless use of AI. And similarly, not even for startups, also for publicly traded companies, right? We're talking about Bloomberg earlier. How much money they spend? Well, this is to dazzle and to their investors, right? I'm certain that a large part is that because they have those incentives. So we need to think a little bit more carefully about what we aim to do and how we use AI. Again, not putting the cart before the horse, but thinking about how we can actually solve this problem. And once we have properly defined the problem, identify whether AI is actually the best solution or not.
While you got the mic there, so on this idea, one of the things you spoke about actually, Oscar, when you were talking about was that you felt it was the community's role to sort of build out responsible AI components of open models, and maybe just tapping into some of the discussion that Alex had about ethical AI. It's also the community's responsibility, our responsibility, personal responsibility to make sure it's used for good. But what is the role that governments might have, or broad legislation might have in terms of how that's governed? So, for instance, the EU's drafting their first guidelines on the use of AI. I can't remember, I think we're out of question in Australia for feedback at the moment for our version of it. So what does the government's role have, and how might that impede progress for AI as a whole?
That's a very controversial question. I'll measure my words very carefully here. From a personal standpoint, I believe the government's role should be as minimal as possible. And the goal should be to avoid stifling innovation. Now, I understand that AI is very scary to a lot of people. I don't personally share those views, although they do make some valid arguments in many cases. So I do understand why the government would like to get involved. Personally, I would prefer if we didn't have, again, talking about incentives, that we didn't incentivize the wrong thing, because in many cases, we have developed some very, very powerful AI that is currently in the hands of a few. And a lot of the regulations that I've seen being proposed, and a lot of the talk about regulation is basically freezing things in time. And it feels almost like, what is this person? They're pulling the ladder, right? So now that we have this few big tech companies that have approached reasonable performance when it comes to AI, now we're gonna say, okay, everyone stop it now. And we're gonna now figure this out, and we're gonna make it basically increase the barrier of entry. That's what it feels like to me, how many of these things really. That worries me a lot. I also see a lot of misinformed opinions. And again, to me, people talking about regulating AI is like talking about regulating math. You need to talk about the application, and you need to talk about the context that's listening to the technology. So the three things you need when it comes to regulation. I'm not an expert in regulation. I'm not pro or against, but I do worry about not making a decision that is a knee-jerk reaction that's going to have some extremely grave long-term consequences.
I think the role, I agree with the government should use that kind of legislative power quite sparingly, but certainly there are some cases where it might be suitable to do that when we're trying to protect people. But not without considering the fact that we live in a global community, and if I'm traveling abroad and I want to watch iView, well, I just turn on my VPN and away we go. Right, so the reality of some of the ill-thought government policies around, the internet, where we're blocking certain sites, and well, then they just pop up from a different domain, and there they go again. There's a practical standpoint, there's a practical position to take, I think, in terms of AI. I'm not an expert, I don't know what that position is entirely, but I think the role of government is to help guide us towards safe use of AI, to eliminating bias and providing ways that we can still innovate and are not unfairly disadvantaged on the global scale. And this is something that the Queensland AI Hub actually talks about quite a lot in terms of how do you encourage AI development in a community that is 69% of people are kind of, a bit blasé about using it, right? When you go on and regulate the hell out of it, and you just drive all that innovation away from here, and then you take jobs away from Queensland. So there's a lot to be said about sort of treading it carefully, I think.
All right. How about time? What time?
I think we have 20 minutes.
All right. Maybe I'll ask the panel one more question, a bit of a thought-provoking, and then we'll go to questions to the audience head. So for each of you, I want you to cast your mind forward and use your crystal ball because you've built one already. So what do you believe will be the most disruptive AI breakthrough in the next 18 months? And how should we prepare for it?
Is this a technological breakthrough?
Your choice.
Yeah.
Crystal ball doesn't seem to be on that.
Crystal ball. So just think about this, two of the positions I often take in this space, and we're seeing it happen right now, is, and this will be very contentious, is social media is the cigarettes of the 21st century. That's the battle that's ongoing right now. We can see Albanese's attempt to try and block it from the 16. So that's one big thing, and that is largely driven by an ability to recommend content that keeps it addictive. So that's AI in the background there. So that's a big one. So crystal ball, what will happen now? I think we're already seeing movements in the Australian government towards that space. I think it could happen more. It definitely won't come out of America. America won't do it because there's a lot of interest around that space. I can see why you wouldn't do it in America. It'd be suicide from a commercial perspective. So that could be something, a big breakthrough in AI could be something like a regulatory. I can see happening because it could fundamentally change what's going on globally. I think it won't be a technological one, it'll be a what to do one. If we look at the technology side, what I think will be the huge breakthrough, I don't think it's going to be a new AI model, it's going to be use cases. So Alex and I were talking a bit outside about Claude's artifacts, so Anthropic's artifacts too, that they've pulled out. Now, that's not necessarily a brand fancy new spanking LLM that pulled out, it's just a very clever way to use them, right? Very clever. And I think there's so much opportunity out there to use them in smart ways that hasn't been done yet, that we could just harvest on the LLM space and the generative AI space for a while. And I think it'll be people wrapping a smart UI or something like Leonardo did and producing something clever that way rather than just a pure fundamental breakthrough. That's right. They're my kind of two things.
I have a very similar opinion on the technical side. I think specialized agents will probably be the way forward. I think the large language model, the multi-domain elements are going to taper off in terms of popularity as specific use cases start to drive more use and more adoption internally. And when that starts to happen, I imagine we'll see a spawning off from a foundational model with these very boutique entities. But from a people perspective, adoption, I think, is going to be the biggest challenge, is because bridging that gap between risk and what is taking away from people, right? If you think about like artists and actors and all the controversy that's going on behind the scenes there in terms of, hey, they're generating my images, my videos, they're basically acting for me. It's going to be hard to be the people adoption, because there's going to be technologies out there that will be able to absolutely utilize to generate that content in a very human-esque way, but it's not art per se, because art people know when to stop, right? So I think it's just, yeah, it's going to continue to go that way. What's the good or bad?
Interesting, some stuff I'm working on too. I think the traditional models for bots are dead. So if I'm to be specific, Amazon Lex, and actually even Copilot, Marshall Copilot, are actually not the right pattern anymore. A platform hasn't been created yet to combat that or to oppose those, but I think that the large language models that we have in their current form can and will completely replace the underlying technology beneath those two solutions, and I apologize, I don't know what the Google one is. But essentially, I think part of that is the recognition that we can build LLM-powered engines that actually can behave in very different ways and communicate with one another through standardized interfaces, and that is achievable now. And I'm looking forward to actually building that kind of stuff, and we're building that right now in Zeligate. And so when we do that, what that allows is for true long-running agentic workflows where the human doesn't have to specify how to do a thing. It just asks the AI to do it, and the AI then goes out and makes use of all of the tools that it has to go and interact with the different platforms it's connected to achieve a specific outcome in a self-directed way. And I think that is entirely achievable now. We're working on it, and I imagine that there are a bunch of others that are working on it. And then what differentiates platform to platform is just how many of the things that you use every day are integrated with this thing. Because the moment I integrate with your Microsoft, your Google, your Salesforce, whatever CRM you're using, whatever financial platform you're using, and I can just do stuff, whatever that stuff might be, then that's a game changer, and that's not far away.
I guess being an engineer, I focus more on the technical side of things. I think that in the very short term, this 12, 15 months, we're going to see a massive improvement at inference time, different technologies, different methodologies. To give you some examples, I know OpenAI has been playing around with caching the state of the model decoding, so you can actually be much faster if you have an initial prompt that's really big and then only change the bit at the end. You can actually do some pretty cool optimizations there. So I think that paired with some of the more traditional incremental engineering improvements is going to enable us to have much more efficient. Most of them are going to open the door to do some other really cool things at different times. We're already seeing some of these models that are quote unquote thinking. We can also see more of the agentic systems that are now more capable because it doesn't take 10 minutes to pass all these things to all different edges, but instead it takes say 30 seconds. But I'll do you one better. I have a pretty cool crystal ball. I can go 5-10 years out, let's say. I think, very bold prediction here. I don't think that the Transformers architecture is it. I mean, it's amazing and has been an unbelievable leap in technology, but I just find it hard to believe that that's it. We found the solution. This is what AGI looks like. So if you look at the Transformer architecture and the attention head, it's been refined since it was invented in 2017, but it has not changed all that much. It's been largely left mostly the same. Speaking hand wavy here. So what I think is going to happen is that in the next 5-10 years, we'll come up with the next big thing. It's going to be a massive leap forward again. And something really fun is going to happen. And all the hardware guys have spent the past 10 years working on improving all the hardware specifically for the Transformer architecture. And now they're going to go, oh shit, here we go all over again. Now all the stuff we built in the past 10 years is completely useless again. That's my goal prediction for the next 5-10 years.
Thank you very much. I think that was very excellent foresight from everybody, quite practical. And I'm a little bit disappointed. I was almost hoping somebody's going to say some form of quantum-enabled AI architecture was going to come out. I was going to get super excited and we're all going to walk away fully inspired. But nonetheless, I think that was excellent. Thank you very much. So, over to the audience for questions.
My question is just around potential use cases in the specifically software delivery space. Companies, when you start using GitHub Copilot, we're also looking for other ways to innovate in software delivery space. I was interested if there's been particular innovations there that have stood out to you as being sort of better than some of the other ones that maybe you've got.
Do yourself a favour, go and download Cursor. Today, go home, tell your whole team, and then actually subscribe for it because you will within 14 days because you want to. What it offers is it's basically a fork of VS Code. There's another one out there now that's coming as well. But it's integrated with all your files, it knows your entire code base, you can ask it all these cool questions, and it's better than going back and forth with a GPT or something. It's amazing. So yeah, I'll go there and say that one. Be careful.
Code generation models still lose. When you use them, you need to know what you're expecting as an output and what you would write and how you would write it yourself. There are tools, there are solutions. So whilst they speed up delivery, I can deliver 5 or 10 times faster than normal. I'm correcting them 40 times more. Right? No, not that. No, not that. I want to do it this way. Right? So sometimes it's actually faster to turn them off, write what you want to write, and then iterate on top of your framework instead. So regardless of the tool, it's just an anecdotal advice.
Okay, so for someone who's maybe new to AI or data science, I know traditionally in this field, a lot of people have master's degrees or a PhD. Do you think in the future we should continue looking at further education, or should we more be looking towards getting experience and more hands-on in the field? So working earlier than with just bachelor's.
I don't have a degree.
You don't have a degree, right?
So
Brother, do you get my talk?
Yeah, I heard your point, yes.
That's my answer.
I think in a world where AI is accelerating as fast as it is, the only thing that keeps you in your job is further self-education. And so if you want to have a job in 10 years, you better figure out how to use AI, and you better also figure out, if you want to be in the AI space, how to build and deploy those types of solutions. Education, I think, is immensely important. It's kind of an accelerator, but it's not the only way to get to where you want to go. And in fact, the tools we have today are accelerators too. You use AI to start learning things today. But I would say one thing about everything else is, if you're not trying it, physically building something, then you're not really learning anything yet. Like, the real lessons come from trying to do it. So the earlier you can do that, better.
And breaking it. Yeah. The moment you break it, you want to.
I think the answer has to change just because, now we're talking about AI and 20 years ago, we were talking about web development. Higher education has always been the safe thing to suggest, and it works for the vast majority of people. But as we have proved here today, it's not an absolute requirement. It's purely a personal choice.
Can I ask another
Sure. Okay, sure.
I just wanted to ask as well, in terms of like AI being a bubble, what do you think like the most likely cause of that would be? Do you think maybe it could be a geopolitical thing, like tensions with other countries? Like, let's say like the supply of semiconductors is not available due to like sanctions or something crazy like that. Like, how would that kind of affect the industry?
Well, Oscar, give us the Google position. Speak on behalf of Google. When you said Google, it's obviously. Look, I think the answer is going to be 100.
Yeah.
So there's no one. So who knows? Let's see what happens.
I just wanted to throw a
The internet was a bubble.
Yeah, exactly.
So was
Yeah, exactly.
I go to 2000s and even up to early 2010s, we've seen massive improvement in smartphones and mobile devices, great innovation. And over the past decade or so, that has become almost a stagnant line. So it's become like a template. Smartphones become a template. Going further, implementation of AI at the OS level might it make how we use smartphones different, or what we have obsolete?
Well, so has anybody been watching Meta recently and what's happening with their Ray-Ban glasses and now the new generation of AR glasses? I think the question you asked about smartphones actually is, well, what's next? And the wearable technology space is just unfortunately still too far behind. But I reckon, here's my crystal ball. In 5 years' time, we'll be still carrying around a smartphone. We'll be still wearing smartwatches, but we will also have smart glasses that where AI is going to be in every single one of those things.
I got something interesting for you, listeners. So let's have a think about globally. What are some of the richest countries in the world? Our buddy over here, they're advertisers, right? Like Google and Facebook are fundamentally advertising organizations, and they have tons of cash out of that. Out of the big wealthy companies that aren't yet advertisers, there's one of them still, which is Microsoft. They've tried about Bing, but they haven't really done very well against Google, and they're still struggling on that front. They now have an incredible opportunity to dominate the world of advertising and topple Google and topple everyone with their new Copilot plus PC. Think about this from what's going to happen here. So Copilot plus PC, they roll that thing out, and it takes a look at everything you're doing all the time. You open your Excel sheet to do a budget for your new car purchase, all of a sudden an ad pops up and says, hey, we're purchasing a car. Toyota's got a sale on right now down the road from you. Why don't you have a look? Now, the same way Google rolled out its search engine for free, and you were the product, so it's selling the ads to you funded. What happens there, what Microsoft does over the next few years, is these Copilot Plus PCs become free for everyone. Because you know what they're doing? They're going to be selling ads. So you know what the next $10 trillion company is? It's Microsoft. When they start controlling the ads, because it becomes the standard, because everyone is going to take this free PC, just like Google became the standard, because everyone took the free service. And especially when they start targeting developing nations. As if the developing nation is going to say no to a whole bunch of free PCs that they're now using to sell them products and sell them ads. This will become the standard. So in terms of an AI-driven operating system, where it could go, that's definitely one direction. I bet you anything that Microsoft may push for this is their vision.
I just wanted to ask, we spoke about AI regulation very broadly and stuff like that. I just want to wonder, like, how would the government regulate AI? Like, how would they enforce that regulation? How would they monitor effective use of that and maybe eventually penalize people for using it incorrectly? Any ideas about that?
I just think it's the same with anything. Like, how do they enforce cigarette sales to minors? Right? How do they enforce it doesn't happen? Like, minors still get cigarettes. They catch someone, they bust them. I don't think it's
Can they?
well, they probably can do that. Back to Oscar's point of the game theory question around incentives. I don't know, my PhD wasn't game theory. And it's about the punishment times the probability of being caught from an economic perspective is simply greater than the gain. That's why some people argue. Ron Close from the mid-50s and 60s used to argue that way. I don't think it works quite that simply, but I think there's just a punishment thing going on. Like, and with AI in particular, EU AI Act's already trying to do that. So that affects me and my company. So we're a high-risk application of AI. We use it for recruitment purposes, which to them is high risk. So from day one, we've made sure we've built our systems in a way that comply with them. So that's what we're doing. And I think other companies will do it. Sure, there'll be some that will get away with it. But especially when you get to a certain scale, it's actually worthwhile that you're impacting enough people that they'll then just have a look. So it becomes something that you can enforce at that scale. Sure, at a smaller scale, what does it matter? In fact, there's probably a little innovation that they may want to stop.
I think the larger companies that we're seeing now forming, so policing a larger organization becomes quite easy because they have their own framework, their governance, they have their own policies. They need to be good citizens and do the right thing. That's not to say that they won't use their powers to influence the policy, which we see that with Facebook and how they kind of interact with the Australian government around social media limitations, things like that. So I would see that it's probably easier for government to police large organizations, but the problems aren't going to come from the large organizations. I know Oscar talked about open source models. One of the biggest risks with an open source model is that anyone can take that model, anyone can fine-tune it and turn it into a really bad agent, right? Something completely nefarious. Put that in the hands of someone who knows how to create a user interface, and you can have really addictive kind of software on the market. And we already see that. Unfortunately, we've seen a young person in the States has actually committed suicide. And so, by the way, if anyone you're in that difficult position right now, definitely seek out help. To deal with those feelings you might be having. But those scenarios play out even when they're with well-intentioned platforms. And I think government will constantly have to adapt to the innovation, but that company's not. If that company's not in Australia and they don't have a footprint here, how can you go and police that? And it actually becomes very hard. So I think, again, back to what I said, there has to be a practical point of view around how government creates policies and laws around AI and its use. No law is even worth the paper it's written on unless it's actually enforced, right? So let's not create laws that can't be enforced.
The international one's a good point. We've run out of time. I know. We're going to wrap up.
I was thinking just to move on right now.
Okay. I was just going to say a sentence really quickly before we jump over to your question. Just to that point there, even international, I agree with that point. The international is a problem. How do you regulate those other ones? But Saudi Arabia and other countries show really well. Like they've totally blocked all pornography. If you go to those countries, you can't access them. So if someone's doing some stuff that your country doesn't like, you just block them.
That's the regulatory framework. That's like compliant companies through mandatory reporting or something.
So these days we have AI revolution, and like all revolutions, it have its own victims. By my mind, first victim of AI were junior developers. Two things about that. First, junior developers usually do simple tasks, which one currently possible to do by ChatGPT, and actually big companies, businesses don't really need web so much as we needed before. It's less workspace, less jobs. At first. Second, junior developers by themselves start to use ChatGPT. And like a result, we grow into make hints, make the prompts, we knew how to generate, but we don't understand the code. We grow in like AI users, but we are not growing like developers. We don't understand logic, we don't understand code. And in a few years, we can have situation when old generation of engineers gone and new will not be able to become something. Will the company do something with it, and what we can do with it? That's my question.
I'll take first that. I think that equating AI to junior developers is the wrong analogy. And I'll go back to my example from my talk earlier, that AI is not going to replace radiologists, but radiologists who use AI will replace those that don't. So I don't think that AI is going to replace junior developers. It's going to raise the bar for how easy it is to become a decent enough developer. I mean, that's using software as an example, but that's going to go across the different industries as well. So I think that's number one. Number two is how do we teach people to use the tools responsibly, and by that I mean not nurturing their own growth and their own seek for knowledge. That's a great question, and that's still an open problem. And I think that's something that we're seeing in real time evolve with the universities, right? Some universities are taking the stance of blocking AI for students, while others are permitting it for some things, but not others. We'll see where the chips fall. I think that's still in active development. I do agree that, as a student, if somebody is simply using ChatGPT to turn in all their assignments, what are they going to learn? Not much, right? But at the same time, they have to understand that AI is a great tool that can be used for many different things. So how do you balance that? We're going to have to rethink about how we learn. And that's going to be it's more of a people problem than an AI problem.
I guess I have two different opinions on this. One is a conversation I had with a junior developer just this week, Scott, where he asked me, should I ask GPT how to write code, or should I try and code it and then ask GPT to fix it? And I said, actually, I don't care which way you do that, so long as you finish it by asking GPT how the damn code works, right? So you got to teach you got to understand the code. It's not just blindly copy paste into it. And I know, like, if I reflect on technology just more broadly, I think we are a society now where most people do not know how things work. Just a fact, right? And yet we're churning out engineers, we're churning out data scientists. We got all these people are still studying in these fields. I lamented when I did my master's in aerospace when one of my cohort, he was writing some code and it wasn't working, and he was using an off-the-shelf software package to solve the problem. He spent 6 months on it, couldn't figure out why the solution wasn't converging. We had a conversation around why cell sizes need to be changed, and it all came down to the math. You talk about having an understanding of mathematics, actually very important. It turns out he never went through a program where they taught that theory, and so he didn't know that having really slender finite elements in your resolver is actually really bad because it won't converge, and there's a number of mathematical reasons why. So it just comes down to, I guess, the point I'm trying to make here is like, the tool can be useful, but if you don't know what it's doing, then you can't understand how it's getting the output. You can't actually criticize or critique the output itself. Except in the scenario of coding, junior developers can become senior developers just by using these tools if they know how to use them properly, right? They know the limitations of the tool. And so I think the education now needs to pivot to, we taught kids how to use graphics calculators so they can graph stuff, and then, they become dumb because they don't know how to write, draw their own graphs anymore, right? And then we get them Excel, and now they don't know how to do anything by hand anymore. Like, the tool is just a tool. You got to understand how the tool works. I think part of the challenge of education today is instilling in people, or even whether you're going it alone or whether you're going through an institution, having the discipline to actually understand how the tool works and what its limitations are, so you get a good outcome.
Sorry.
My question was about the co-pilot and having the advertising out there, computers everywhere. It sounds like a dystopian type future. If you were concerned about AI, would you have to in the future, do you think, like, opt out of society and go off the grid if you wanted to avoid it?
Yeah.
I'm sure Google has a position on this. I don't know what the answer to that question is. I mean, again, looking at the way I interact with the internet, I've given up on my privacy. I've just given up. I'm just not caring. I think that's what's happening. Just give up and not care. Well, there's a few people that don't use Google nowadays, and they don't want to be retargeted with ads, and do have stuff like that happen to them. Not that Google does that, so you can't do that with third-party cookies anymore anyway. But I don't know. I think there are people who do that. I think it's just forced down some time unless regulations on the government side otherwise.
I'll take your scary thought and I'll double it up. And what happens when you can't trust anything that anybody says online because you don't know if it's a natural person or an AI behind screen, right? I think that's going to be a big societal shift. I have no idea what's going to change, but I would be surprised if it's not a very large change in how we behave online.
Well, my name is Jerome. I'm building a new social media platform, and I'm trying to make it not a cigarette, so something that people like, but it doesn't feel like a cigarette. What is the most concerning thing that AI is going to affect socially? We've spoken about technology, but we've seen how social media has made an impact negatively on people socially, how they act, when they're at a restaurant and they're left on their phone, not discussing with each other. So what's the most concerning thing that AI is going to bring negatively to people?
Piggyback on my last thought, is going to be like trust. It's going to be very difficult to trust anything that anybody says.
I don't know. I think actually it won't be. It'll probably improve our critical thinking. I would hope that we are an adaptable civilization, and we already know you can't trust everything you read online, even though that doesn't stop people trusting what they read online. I think this will just kind of exaggerate that in the short term. That there's just so much more stuff you can't believe because it's and I don't know whether this is a Russian proverb, but I heard it saying that was attributed once that said, trust but verify. I think that's kind of the philosophy that people need to approach the internet with. Take your first Google search result and believe it because you have inherent bias in how you answer the question. you get what you search for, right? And I think with AI, it's going to be a very similar thing. Yeah, tweeting on social media.
Quick comment, I've got a female friend of mine who told me that the worst thing that's happened, no one gets on her own bar anymore.
I've got 3 little girls, and I'm terrified, right? Like, I don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. But I know that I can teach them right now that, you have to validate and verify, right? Yeah, I don't know. I don't use social media for that reason. I don't like it. I don't trigger myself to it. But it can be toxic, right? And with AI layered on top of that, learning and regurgitating everything else that's happening, what do you do?
Just back to the fact that you're building a social media platform, and you have your own reasons for doing that, right? In a world where there's already enough social media platforms that you can't, they're everywhere. How your social media platform benefits society is determined by your ethics. It's determined by how you build it. And so in this particular scenario, and how AI is deployed or used or allowed to be used on your platform, that's up to you as the builder. And very famously, Stack Overflow banned bots from answering questions because they were creating bullshit answers, and it was really upsetting the community that all of the forums were being flooded with really bad recommendations. So there's an example of a business that said, we value human contribution over AI contribution, and we're making decisions around how to do that. But then also meant they have to have a whole bunch of technology in place to try and find out who's the bot, right? So the challenge then back on you, how are you going to stop 10,000 AI agents hitting your platform and having predatory tactics and things like that? That comes up here.
Sorry, one quick kind of thought is that the one good possible outcome of having social media completely overrun by bots is that all those LinkedIn charlatans that Evan hates so much will finally be drowned out in the noise.
Yeah, talking about the quality of data, the quality of the output of the AI, whereas garbage data is output garbage quality. In a hypothetical situation in the distant future where AI could be producing more data than humans are, like writings and images and everything like that, would data degradation be a concern then for that?
It already is a concern, and there's already been a lot of recent developments on trying to fix that problem. I know very recently Google posted a very interesting paper on a product called Synth ID, and the idea is that Google's using some very smart sampling techniques to fingerprint text that has been produced by AI. So you can actually tell with a fairly high degree of certainty if a piece of text, as long as it's long enough, you can determine not only if it is from AI, but what specific model produced it, as long as the model turns that on from their end. So there's plenty of smart people already thinking about this as a problem, but it is a huge problem, and it is being actively researched.
Okay, thanks. I think that will be the last question. Let's put our hands together and
Thank you everybody for coming, and thank you to the panel for your time this afternoon. I think it's been a really interesting conversation. I think everyone would agree with me. It's been really insightful to hear different perspectives. We've ranged from everywhere from government regulation down to how to choose a particular LLM or small language model as well. So thank you very much for your time and your contributions to the conversation. Everyone else, thanks for your attention and and the questions, the excellent questions. And I think some of them are staying around, and then you've got to eject straight away. But if you've got any follow-up questions, feel free to ask. Great. Cheers all.